Shut up, Mom!
How about taking me on, or is that too frightening for you?
You lonely, Mom? You want him?
From a star fired twice for drug addiction to a tool belt bought minutes before filming, the 1970s sitcom One Day at a Time hid bizarre secrets behind its groundbreaking facade. The cast faced shocking scandals, creators based the show on family trauma, and even Whitney Houston's name traces back to this series. Here are 15 weird facts you didn't know about One Day at a Time, Sivo, 1975. Fact 1. 2 failed pilots before success.
How much is this school?
Oh, only $900 a semester.
$900? It's 9 baskets of groceries. Must be a hell of a school.
Before One Day at a Time became the groundbreaking sitcom that millions loved, it almost never made it to air at all. Producer Norman Lear filmed an entirely different pilot in 1975 under the working title 3 to Get Ready, and it looked nothing like the show that eventually premiered. In this first version, Bonnie Franklin's character Anne worked as a nurse in a hospital setting, and she only had one teenage daughter instead of 2. Pat Harrington Jr. was already cast as Schneider, the apartment building superintendent, and Marcia Rod played Anne's neighbor and friend. When Lear screened this pilot for CBS executives, they passed on it completely. The network simply wasn't interested in picking up the series as it was. Rather than giving up, Lear went back to the drawing board and made some major changes. He completely ditched the hospital setting because it wasn't working, deciding instead to focus entirely on Anne's home life and her struggles as a newly divorced mother. He added a second daughter to the mix, which created a much more dynamic family situation and gave the writers more storylines to explore. Lear also decided that Marcia Rod wasn't the right fit for the neighbor character, so he replaced her with Mary Louise Wilson. With all these changes in place, the show was renamed One Day at a Time and filmed a second pilot. This time, CBS executives loved what they saw and greenlit the series. The show premiered in December of 1975 and became an instant hit, running for 9 successful seasons. Without that complete retooling, one of television's most beloved sitcoms might never have existed at all. Fact 2. Schneider's iconic tool belt.
Look, I love you all, and I know you love Annie, but we're not going to be here.
What?
Annie and I are going to go to Texas and be with my family.
Was purchased last minute, one of the most recognizable elements of Dwayne Schneider's character almost didn't exist at all. Pat Harrington Jr. took his role as the apartment building superintendent very seriously and wanted to create a memorable look for the character. He grew a Clark Gable-style pencil mustache because Schneider was supposed to be a self-styled ladies' man who fancied himself irresistible to women. Harrington carefully planned out the white t-shirt with a cigarette pack rolled up in the sleeve and the denim vest that became Schneider's trademark uniform. But on the day they were about to tape the very first episode, Harrington stood on set and realized something was missing from his costume. He felt that Schneider needed one more element to really sell the character as a working-class handyman who was always ready to fix things around the building. With only 30 minutes left before they started filming, Harrington approached a studio electrician who was working on the set and made him an offer. He paid the electrician cash for his well-worn, authentic tool belt that came complete with a hammer already attached to it. Harrington then slung the belt around his hips in a John Wayne-style swagger, and Schneider's complete look was born. That last-minute decision turned out to be brilliant because the tool belt became one of the most iconic parts of the character's appearance. Fans immediately associated it with Schneider, and it became so famous that decades later, when the show was rebooted, the new Schneider character wore a nearly identical tool belt as a tribute to the original. Fact 3. Mackenzie Phillips was fired twice for drugs.
I didn't want to upset you with all you've got in your mind. I had a paddling coming, so I just went down to take my punishment.
Mackenzie Phillips' struggle with addiction became one of the most tragic and well-documented stories in television history. During the show's third season in 1977, Phillips was arrested for disorderly conduct, and her drug and alcohol abuse began affecting her work. By the 1979 to 1980 season, she started arriving late to rehearsals and sometimes appeared completely incoherent on set. The producers initially didn't understand what was wrong, but it soon became clear that Phillips was dealing with a serious substance abuse problem. They ordered her to take a 6-week break to get treatment and overcome her addiction, hoping that would solve the problem. Unfortunately, it wasn't enough. After Phillips suffered 2 near-fatal overdoses, the producers made the difficult decision to fire her in 1980. Her character Julie married her boyfriend Max and supposedly moved to Houston, writing her out of the show. Phillips voluntarily entered Fair Oaks Hospital for rehabilitation treatment, and after completing the program in 1981, the producers decided to give her a second chance. They invited her back to the show for a 2-part guest appearance where Julie and Max dealt with marital problems. The ratings were good, so Phillips rejoined the cast. But history repeated itself when Phillips relapsed into cocaine use in 1982. The following year, during the 9th and final season, she collapsed on the show's set during a rehearsal. Associate producer Patricia Fass Palmer woke her up and asked Phillips to take a urine test. Phillips looked at Palmer and simply told her not to bother. She was quietly fired for the second and final time, and her character was permanently written out of the series without any real explanation. Fact 4, the show's title, ironically mirrored reality.
Oh, honey, I love it. I love it. It's just wonderful. The furniture makes all the difference. You'd never knew it was used.
Well, it does look a lot better here than it did in the funeral parlor.
Life has a strange way of imitating art, and nowhere was this more apparent than with Mackenzie Phillips during the 1979 to 1980 season of One Day at a Time. The show's title came from the famous Alcoholics Anonymous slogan that encourages people in recovery to focus on staying sober one day at a time rather than worrying about the rest of their lives. It's a mantra that has helped millions of people overcome addiction by breaking down the seemingly impossible task of lifelong sobriety into manageable daily goals. The irony was almost too perfect when Phillips, who played the rebellious daughter Julie on a show literally named after this recovery principle, found herself desperately needing that same philosophy in her real life. During that season, Phillips was dealing with a devastating drug addiction that was spiraling completely out of control. She was using cocaine and heroin regularly, and her behavior on set became increasingly erratic and unpredictable. Her castmates and crew members watched helplessly as she struggled, and the producers eventually had no choice but to intervene. When Phillips entered rehab in 1980, the phrase, "one day at a time," transformed from being just the title of her hit television show into a literal lifeline she needed to survive. The saying that millions of viewers heard in the theme song every week became her daily mantra as she fought to overcome the addiction that had nearly destroyed her career and her life. It was a surreal and sobering reminder that the serious issues the show tackled in its storylines were very real problems that even the cast members themselves were facing behind the scenes. Fact 5. Whitney Houston was named after the creator.
Well, I didn't think it was right. I mean, after all, she's just 16, and I felt a girl of that age wasn't able to...
One of the most surprising connections in entertainment history links the legendary singer Whitney Houston to the sitcom One Day at a Time. The show was co-created by Whitney Blake, an actress who was probably best known for playing Dorothy Baxter, nicknamed Mrs. B on the 1960s sitcom Hazel. Blake and her husband Alan Mannings, who had both been actors in the 1950s and 60s, teamed up to write and develop One Day at a Time based on Blake's own experiences. When Whitney Houston was born on August 9, 1963 in Newark, New Jersey. Her parents, Sissy and John Houston, were huge fans of Whitney Blake. They admired Blake's work as an actress and were so impressed by her that they decided to name their daughter after her. For years, this was largely unknown trivia that only the most dedicated entertainment historians knew about. But in 2018, the documentary film titled Whitney was released, exploring the life and career of Whitney Houston. In the documentary, this fascinating connection was finally confirmed and brought to public attention. The revelation added another layer to Whitney Houston's legacy and created an unexpected link between the world of 70s sitcoms and one of the greatest voices in music history. It's a reminder of how the entertainment industry is filled with these kinds of surprising connections. Whitney Blake probably never imagined when she was acting in television shows in the 1960s that a future superstar would carry her name and become one of the most celebrated singers of all time. Fact 6. The creator's daughter became a sitcom, Mom 2.
Well, next time you run away, why don't you take the American plan? Meals are included.
The inspiration behind One Day at a Time came from a very real and personal place. Whitney Blake didn't just imagine the struggles of a divorced single mother trying to raise her children in the 1970s, she lived them herself. Blake married Tom Baxter in 1944 when she was just 18 years old, and they had 3 children together over the next several years. But by 1950, the marriage had fallen apart, and Blake found herself divorced at age 26 with 3 young kids to support. She worked multiple day jobs to pay the bills while taking drama classes at night, desperately pursuing her dream of becoming a professional actress. Her determination paid off, and she eventually found success in Hollywood. When Blake and her third husband, Alan Mannings, decided to create One Day at a Time, she drew heavily from those difficult years as a single mother. The show's premise about a divorced woman named Ann Romano moving to Indianapolis with her 2 teenage daughters and starting over was essentially Blake's own story, just updated for the 70s. But here's where the story gets even more interesting. One of the 3 children that Blake raised as a single mother was a daughter named Meredith Ann Baxter, who was born on June 21, 1947. Meredith followed her mother into acting and became quite successful in her own right. In 1982, just as One Day at a Time was winding down its successful run, Meredith Baxter landed the role of Elise Keaton on the hit NBC sitcom Family Ties. So the daughter of the woman who created a show about a single mother raising kids ended up playing a sitcom, Mother herself, creating a beautiful full-circle moment in television history. Fact 7. Bonnie Franklin threatened to quit after season 1. Behind the cheerful opening credits and laugh track, One Day at a Time almost lost its star before it really got started. Bonnie Franklin was cast as Ann Romano and became the heart of the show, but she was deeply unhappy during the entire first season. The show premiered in December of 1975 and ran for 15 episodes in that initial season. Franklin, who was a talented actress with Broadway experience, felt that the scripts simply weren't good enough and that the show wasn't living up to its potential. She wasn't alone in her assessment either. In a Fox TV Guide special called The Truth Behind the Sitcoms, both Franklin and Pat Harrington Jr. openly admitted that none of the episodes from the first season were very good. The writing was weak, the storylines weren't connecting with audiences the way they should have been, and Franklin could see that if things didn't improve dramatically, the show would be canceled. Rather than just quietly suffering through it, Franklin decided to take action. At the end of that 15-episode first season, she went to producer Norman Lear and the network executives and delivered an ultimatum. She told them in no uncertain terms that she would quit the show if the script quality didn't improve immediately. This was a bold and risky move because Franklin could have been replaced or the show could have been canceled entirely. But her gamble paid off. The producers took her concerns seriously and agreed to bring her into the creative process. They gave Franklin significantly more input into the show's direction, allowing her to help shape storylines and have a say in how her character developed. This creative control made all the difference, and the show's quality improved dramatically in the second season. Fact 8. Valerie Bertinelli's fan mail overwhelmed the studio.
Every time I wanted to sit down and talk out a problem, all he'd say was, "We'll settle it in the bedroom."
When 15-year-old Valerie Bertinelli was cast as Barbara Cooper, the younger daughter on One Day at a Time, nobody expected her to become a teenage sensation. Bertinelli had very little acting experience when she auditioned for producer Norman Lear, but there was something about her natural charm and girl-next-door appeal that was undeniable. She landed the role and appeared in the show's premiere in December of 1975. By the end of just one season, something unexpected had happened. Valerie Bertinelli had become America's sweetheart, and her popularity exploded in a way that nobody had anticipated. With her button nose, hazel eyes, and thick mane of dark hair, teenage girls wanted to be her, and teenage boys wanted to date her. She started appearing on the covers of every teen fan magazine of the era, including Tiger Beat, Teen Beat, 16, and others. She was suddenly everywhere, and her face became one of the most recognizable in America. Pat Harrington Jr., who played Schneider, later talked about this phenomenon in the TV Guide special Behind the Sitcom. He revealed that the studio was receiving such massive amounts of fan mail addressed to Valerie Bertinelli that they could barely cope with it. Letters arrived in sacks, and the volume was overwhelming for the staff, who had to sort and process it all. The studio had never seen anything quite like it for a supporting actress on a sitcom. Interestingly, despite all this attention and being featured in nearly every teen publication, Bertinelli later confessed in her autobiography that she spent many years feeling unattractive, especially when she compared herself to her co-star, Mackenzie Phillips. It's a reminder that fame and public adoration don't always translate to confidence and self-esteem behind the scenes. Fact 9. Elton John sent a hilarious autograph.
I know. In a year or so, when I move out, I can come live with you.
Aw, sis. Forget it.
In December of 1976, One Day at a Time aired a special holiday episode titled Happy New Year that became one of the most memorable moments in the show's entire run. The episode featured the Romano family and Schneider putting on a variety show at a local retirement home to entertain the elderly residents. As part of this performance, Barbara and Julie dressed up in full costume as pop superstars Elton John and Kiki D and performed the hit song Don't Go Breaking My Heart, which had been released earlier that year and spent 4 weeks at #1 in the United States. Valerie Bertinelli wore the outrageous oversized sunglasses, platform shoes, and glittery outfit that Elton John was famous for wearing, while Mackenzie Phillips took on the Kiki D role. The performance was surprisingly good and became a fan favorite moment from the series. Bertinelli was a huge Elton John fan in real life, and Barbara Cooper was written as an Elton John fan on the show as well, with posters of the singer decorating her bedroom. After the episode aired, someone on the production crew thought it would be fun to send a tape of the performance to Elton John himself to see if he would get a kick out of it. To everyone's delight and surprise, the legendary musician not only watched it, but actually took the time to respond. Elton John mailed Valerie Bertinelli a personally autographed photo of himself. The inscription he wrote on it was hilarious and perfectly captured his famous sense of humor. It read, "You look more like me than I do. Love, Elton." Bertinelli was absolutely thrilled to receive this treasure from her idol, and she proudly displayed the autographed photo in her home for years afterward. She still mentions it fondly in interviews decades later. Fact 10. Pat Harrington drank water to create Schneider's gut.
I know what I'm doing wrong. You want us to move just a little bit slower. You precious. Of course, you got it.
Creating the perfect look for a character sometimes requires actors to go to unusual lengths, and Pat Harrington Jr. was completely dedicated to making Schneider feel authentic. The character was supposed to be a working-class apartment building superintendent who saw himself as a smooth ladies' man, but was actually just a lovable goofball. Harrington carefully crafted every element of Schneider's appearance, from the Clark Gable-inspired pencil mustache to the white t-shirt with a cigarette pack rolled up in the sleeve to the denim vest and tool belt. But there was one physical characteristic that Harrington felt was essential for making Schneider look like a real blue-collar worker. He needed to have a bit of a gut pressing against his t-shirt. Harrington himself was not a particularly heavy man, so he had to find a way to create this authentic working-class physique. His solution was both simple and uncomfortable. Before each episode taping, Harrington would drink large amounts of water, intentionally filling his stomach until it pushed out against his shirt in exactly the way he wanted. This gave Schneider that slightly paunchy beer belly look that made him seem more realistic as a middle-aged building superintendent. It was a small detail that most viewers probably never consciously noticed, but it was part of what made the character feel so genuine and lived in. Harrington maintained this routine throughout the show's entire 9-year run here, which meant he spent hundreds of tapings feeling bloated and uncomfortable, all in service of his character. Later, Harrington disclosed this technique in an interview, and it gave fans a new appreciation for the dedication he brought to the role. It's these kinds of small, thoughtful choices that separate good character acting from great character acting. Fact 11. A neighbor character vanished without explanation.
3 girls with 3 boys.
So?
Side by side in sleeping bags.
With zippers.
Television shows often write characters out with dramatic farewell episodes, or at least some kind of explanation for why they're leaving. But that's not what happened with Ginny Roblicki on One Day at a Time. After Richard Masur's character David Kane was written off the show at the end of the first season, the producers decided Ann Romano needed a new friend and comedic foil. They cast Broadway actress Mary Louise Wilson to play Ginny, a cocktail waitress who became Ann's neighbor, best friend, and confidant. Ginny was introduced early in the second season and appeared in 14 episodes throughout that year. Wilson was a talented stage actress who had spent 6 years performing primarily on Broadway before taking this television role. But there was a problem from the very beginning. Wilson had not done a television show since 1970, and she found herself completely unaccustomed to the technical demands of a multi-camera sitcom filmed in front of a live studio audience. She struggled with the cue lights and cameras, and in her frustration, she felt miserable in the role despite knowing it was the kind of break most actors would dream about. Wilson later admitted she didn't even find the show funny when she watched an episode before being cast. She wasn't given a script until the first read-through of her very first episode, which made everything even more difficult. At the end of the second season, Wilson begged her agent to ask Norman Lear to release her from her contract. Lear agreed, and Wilson was let go. But here's the weird part. The character of Ginny Roblicki simply vanished without a trace. There was no farewell episode, no explanation, no mention of where she went or why she wasn't around anymore. She just stopped appearing, and nobody on the show ever referenced her again except for one brief clip in a 5th season retrospective episode. Fact 12. CBS moved the show. 11 times network television scheduling can make or break a show, and One Day at a Time experienced one of the most chaotic scheduling histories in television despite being a ratings success. When the show premiered in December of 1975, it started on Tuesday nights at 9:30, going up against tough competition like the miniseries Rich Man, Poor Man on ABC and Policewoman starring Angie Dickinson on NBC. Despite this competition, the show performed well and finished its first season ranked number 12 overall with a 23.1 rating. For the next few years, CBS kept tinkering with the schedule, moving one day at a time to different time slots to try to maximize ratings. The show consistently ranked among the top 20 and frequently landed in the top 10 programs in the Nielsen ratings. During the 1979 to 1980 season, CBS moved the show to its powerhouse Sunday night lineup, which included heavy hitters like 60 Minutes, All in the Family, The Jeffersons, Alice, and the medical drama Trapper John, M.D. The show thrived in this Sunday night slot and remained there through most of its successful years. But CBS couldn't leave well enough alone. Over the course of the show's 9-season run, the network moved one day at a time, around the primetime schedule an astounding 11 different times, bouncing it from Tuesday to Sunday to Monday, and to various time slots within those nights. This constant shuffling was frustrating for both the cast and the loyal viewers who had to keep track of when the show was airing. By the end of the 1982 to 83 season, which was the show's 8th year, viewership finally began to slip, and the series ended that season ranked at number 16. The constant moves had taken their toll. Fact 13, the series had 2 finales.
When I get a problem, I put on an Elton John record, get into a hot bath with a double cheeseburger.
When One Day at a Time reached its 9th and final season in 1983 to 84, both Bonnie Franklin and Valerie Bertinelli had decided they were ready to move on from their roles. They agreed to do one more season to give the show a proper ending, but they made it clear they wouldn't be continuing beyond that. The show ultimately produced 209 episodes before ending its run on May 28, 1984. But here's where things get unusual. The show essentially had 2 different series finales back-to-back. The penultimate episode, which was actually the more traditional series finale, was called Off We Go. In this episode, Anne Romano, who had remarried and become Anne Royer, makes the decision to take a job in London, England. She packs up and leaves Indianapolis, saying goodbye to her daughters Barbara and Julie, who are now grown women with families of their own. It was an emotional and fitting end to the series, wrapping up Anne's 9-year journey from newly divorced single mother to confident, independent woman starting a new chapter abroad. But then came episode 209, the actual final episode that aired, which was titled Another Man's Shoes. This episode focused entirely on Schneider and was actually a backdoor pilot for a proposed spin-off series. In the episode, Schneider learns that his brother has died, leaving behind 2 orphaned children, a niece and a nephew. One of them was played by a young Corey Feldman, who would go on to become a major child star. Schneider decides to move to Florida to take care of them and raise them as his own. Only 2 series regulars appeared in this episode, Schneider himself and Barbara, who had a small part. The episode was designed to launch a new sitcom centered on Schneider in Florida, but CBS never picked it up. Fact 14, Bertinelli and Phillips were secretly envious of each other. From the outside, Mackenzie Phillips and Valerie Bertinelli seemed like they had it all as teenage stars on one of television's most popular sitcoms. Phillips was the more experienced actress, having already appeared in the hit film American Graffiti before landing the role of Julie Cooper. Bertinelli was the newcomer who quickly became a teenage sensation and America's sweetheart. But behind the scenes, both young women were struggling with deep insecurities and secretly envying what the other had. Valerie Bertinelli appeared on the covers of countless teen magazines throughout the late 70s and early 80s. She was featured in Tiger Beat, Teen Beat, 16, and even made it onto People magazine covers multiple times. She received sacks full of fan mail every week and was constantly recognized wherever she went. But despite all this attention and public adoration, Bertinelli confessed years later in her autobiography that she spent many years feeling unattractive and inadequate. When she looked at Mackenzie Phillips, She saw someone who seemed effortlessly cool and beautiful, and she couldn't shake the feeling that she didn't measure up to her co-star. Meanwhile, Mackenzie Phillips was dealing with her own issues and looking at Bertinelli with completely different eyes. Phillips was secretly envious of Bertinelli's wholesome Italian Catholic upbringing and close-knit family life. Phillips had grown up in the chaotic world of rock and roll as the daughter of John Phillips from the Mamas and the Papas, surrounded by drugs and instability from a young age. She watched Bertinelli's normal family dynamics and massive media popularity with a mixture of admiration and jealousy. Phillips later revealed in her own memoir that she longed for the kind of stable, loving family environment that Bertinelli took for granted. It's a poignant reminder that fame and success don't protect anyone from feeling inadequate or wishing for what someone else has. Fact 15. Mackenzie Phillips spent hundreds of thousands on drugs.
You got a snippet pencil?
Just copping a quick shave, you know what I mean?
The scope of Mackenzie Phillips' drug addiction during her time on One Day at a Time was truly staggering and difficult to comprehend. When Phillips was fired from the show in 1980 after her addiction spiraled completely out of control, she later admitted in interviews just how much money she had burned through feeding her habit. During that single year leading up to her termination, Phillips estimated that she had spent somewhere between $300,000 and $400,000 on drugs. She told People magazine, "I don't know where it went, but $300,000 to $400,000 is gone, mostly for drugs. I mean, $500,000 in cash is gone." This was an astronomical amount of money, especially considering this was in 1980 dollars, which would be worth well over $1 million in today's currency. Phillips was earning $50,000 per week at the height of the show's success, making her one of the highest-paid actors on television at that time, but she was spending it as fast as it came in. Even more shocking, Phillips' addiction issues were directly inherited from her father. John Phillips, the founder and lead singer of the legendary folk rock group, the Mamas and the Papas, had his own devastating drug problems that were even worse than his daughter's. John Phillips admitted to spending $1 million per year on heroin and cocaine for himself and his third wife, Genevieve Waite. The scale of their combined drug spending is almost impossible to fathom. It represented not just a personal tragedy, but also a generational cycle of addiction that nearly destroyed both of them. Phillips has since gotten sober and has spent years working as a drug rehab counselor, helping others avoid the same devastating path that nearly cost her everything.